How you guys doing today? Hi, Mr. Gumby. How are things on Guernsey? John, how are you? Joe, Joseph, Rick. Hey, Clyde, how you doing? Uh, they were talking about Bruce's new position, and I missed it. I've been trying to figure out what it was. So if anyone knows, let me know. Um, Listen, what I was. Hi, Mark. How you doing, man? What I was talking about earlier today. A couple things. I'll wait until we sort of get a few more people here. Hi, Thomas. How are you? I wanted to talk about the. Hi, Derek and Donald. I wanted to talk about what we get when we buy a watch, and something came up since this morning. Hi, John. How are you? Jello, everyone, huh? So anyway, a couple things that I thought were important is that to what extent, well, I think it's to a really a great extent, and oddly enough, it becomes important, is we're sort of buying into an ideal or an idea, and the idea or the ideal is a, a mechanical watch that has certain properties. Holy smoke. Wow. Gee, that's amazing, Clyde. I didn't know he was even in that area. That's fantastic. Thanks. Anyway, as I was saying, wow. As I was saying, the idea of a mechanical watch as being something that has a certain kind of, I don't know what it comes to some. I mean, why do we like it? I mean, it has some kind of magic to it that I can't describe. Hi, Ronan, and the so this is what we need to sort of look into and to talk about some is that what is it that we pay so much money for these things for? I still have on my Chronomet Serene earlier today. I don't know, some of you probably heard this, but this has got its own personality. I wind it up and it just does beautifully, and at some point it decides to take a break. And so I look and my watch is 2 hours behind, reset it, and it runs perfect from then on. And I don't know what it is. Okay. All right. Anyway, so this is sort of what I'd really like to talk about is sort of what is it in the watch itself, and then I want to talk about another thing. Hi, Domenico, how are you? Ciao de Roma. And and that is the sort of a new practice that's come out. I don't know if it's new or not. New to me. Let's say that Abraham-Breguet made a watch, and the only part of the watch he did was the dial and the hands, and that was it. Some other guy that was, walking by the shop and had some watchmaking background, had some off-the-shelf movement and said, "Hey, I see you're spending a lot of time making your watches. Why don't we do this? If you design a few of the dials for me, what I'll do is that I've got all of these other movements, and I can just sort of slap them all together, and we'll call it a brigade watch." And this is shortly after the French Revolution. And if you looked at a watch like that today, people would say, "Wow, it's a real brigade because it's got this dial that he made." And we're starting to I just sort of that sort of becomes like certain kinds of art that was done. One of the things that I'd read, I was reading something, I forgot what it was, a long time ago, and it talked about this artist who was very popular at the time. I don't know who he was. It could have been Andy Warhol, could come to think of it. But what he'd do is that he had this big thing of butcher paper, and he had the butcher paper running along the wall of his studio, and he would mark off certain portions of each of this butcher paper, and he would put some little squibble on it, and then he had all these assistants filling it in and doing most of the work on it. Now, when I say I don't know how old or how long this practice has been around, I also read that Michelangelo on painting a Sistine Chapel had all these assistants painting in too. So it's apparently not really new. But with the watches, what a couple of them did, Jaime Ahsoka and Vinny Halter, was that they had they did the dials on it. And from what I understand, and you can see from the pictures, they're quite nice dials. But one has a Solita movement and the other one has a Miyota movement, both relatively inexpensive off-the-shelf movements. But they have the name of this famous and well-respected and also very expensive watchmaker on it. Now, something like a Tsunami by Soka, something, boy, I tell you, that would be really a wonderful watch to have. He did the movement, he does all of this other stuff too, and it's really a beautiful watch. Same thing with Vianney Halter. His stuff is even rarer, I think, and somewhat more expensive, but still, the expense is something that's out of our range. I mean, it's something we can't afford. So, so you have, on the one hand, you have these things that we want to get. We want to get a good watch. We want to buy a good watchmaker, and other people buy watches. They're not too sure about the watchmaker. They don't know much about it. They don't know who made it. But they know the brand, and so they buy the brand because they trust it. And if it's this brand, we trust the rest of it. So anyway, so that's what I wanted to sort of talk with you guys about. Hi, Phil. How you doing, Forbin? Well, to be fair, Michelangelo did spend a lot of time fighting Shredder. Okay. Let's see. I buy primarily on two factors: beauty, whatever catches my eye, dial, case, movement, hands, and uniqueness. I like having watches that aren't often seen on other wrists. Okay. Hi, Vivek. How you doing? John, Omega equal moonwalk, Breitling equal aviation. Those companies represent part of us. Fine horology is another story. Why? Is that what you're trying to say? John, what I'm trying to say is why we buy these things. I mean, when I used to fly, they had what's called an FBO, fixed base operation, where they had a little pilot shop. And in the pilot shop, they had two brands of watches. One was Breitling and the other one was Tag Heuer. And I thought those must be the two best watches in the world. But the more I learned about Breitling as doing, what does Breitling really do? Uh, Unfortunately, they put in some movements that they give these phony baloney names to that make it sound like they're Breitling movements. For example, the B-17 is an ETA movement. So it's sort of lost to me any kind of status that it had, even though I do know that they have a couple movements. One they co-developed with Tudor. So what I'm trying to say is your fine horology is what, I don't know. Maybe we're not looking for fine horology. Maybe some people are looking for, like putting on a fancy hat or something. It's a status symbol. I don't know. I think that how can you have something as a quote status symbol? Some of the more obvious examples would be Rolex and Patek Philippe. But if it's sort of junky, I don't think it would sustain its status as such. So anyway, so it's going back to this. What is it we're really getting? If we get the finest watch ever, it's probably going to be made by some assistant. All right, it's designed by a master watchmaker. My FP Journe from 2007. Now, by 2007, FP Journe had been in business for about 8 years, and so by then he had all of these other people working for him. On the other hand, my one from 2002, the Resonance, I'm pretty sure that it was something he had to handle himself for the most part. And it's sort of an interesting thing is that if we buy an original painting, we don't want something that was slopped together by an assistant. And so we have to learn a lot about art to figure out the difference. And if you're just buying for an artist's name, you usually don't end up doing too well. On the other hand, if you buy art that you like, I've found more people who will say that, gee whiz, that thing went up sky high in value. Same is true with watches. Now, going up sky high in value it's more of a sign of popularity than it is any kind of intrinsic value. So these are some of the things. So I want to get your version of it. But Breitling did come up with some winners with real in-house movements. The B09 rendition's outstanding. They went through more trouble to make it manual line. Okay, yeah, no, that's true, Clyde. Why screw it up, though, with some phony baloney name for something else? Why not say, look, yeah, we use ETAs, and what we do with these ETAs is X, Y, and Z. But we also have our own movement. You mentioned the B09. Wasn't the B09 the one they co-developed with Tudor? I'm not sure. I know the B01 is one that they pretty much developed. Yeah, Timex is very popular. Popularity is, there are a lot of bases for popularity. One is like, I used to love Timex because this is sort of in the pre-quartz era, post-sundial, pre-quartz. And I go out and get a Timex, and as things kept perfect timing and it'd break at a certain point, I just get another one. And, people know the name Timex. In fact, one of the explanations of why Rolex is called Rolex is that Timex was a high status watch name at the time, and they figured, we're going to call ours Rolex for God knows why. Okay, hardly anyone ever notices what watch I'm wearing, so it's not a status symbol for me. Yes, same here. Before I retired, I was a professor, and professors' watches they're nothing. Most of them know nothing about those, and they'll get whatever watch is handy. They don't care whether it's quartz or anything else. The people and that's true with every other business too, just about. I know that certain lawyers, they have sort of a contest in terms of the quality of watches that they have. Some professions do, some don't. I was at having a procedure at a doctor's office, and the anesthesiologist had a Yachtmaster too, and I was probably the only patient there who knew what it was, and talked to him about it, and I think he gave me an extra dose of good juice when he knocked me out. I don't know. It's a variation of the BO1. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, most watch companies have that, Clyde. They'll have a main, what we'll call a base movement, and they'll build it on the base movement. You take Harbring too, they've got the A11, and everything they've made since then has been some variation on that. So that's pretty much par for the course. If you look at, I don't think Rolex has too many either. Same with Omega. Hi there, Alter H King. No question that, let's say, Patek makes very good watches, but in my opinion, it's also very clear that more than half of the money is for the brand name. I agree with that. Yeah, a lot of people. I would rather pay a lot for the watch and not for the amount of money that they spend on promotion. If you get a Harbring 2, I don't think they spend any on promotion, to tell you the truth, except they go and they regularly win Grand Prix, and that's about the only promotion you're going to see. Same thing with Lang & Heim. You don't see a lot of promotion of those watches, especially compared to other German brands like Longa and Sin and some of the other ones that they have. Hi, NS something. How you doing? Let's see. Hi there, Amatrice Bridge Band. Heard some rumor that Breitling hasn't been doing well for a while now. They probably had a design issue. Who knows? I don't know. So many of the watch brands are, they're bought and sold like any businesses. I know that Breitling was owned by somebody, and recently they were mostly bought by somebody else. And who knows what's going to happen after that? You take Lang & Heim, there was no Heim after year one, and it was all Marco Lang. And I guess he needed the money for operations or something. And so the people who gave him money also, they traded the money for control. And at some point in 2018, he was more or less forced out. But, so they have all of these wonderful designs that he did. There's something like 6 or 7 movements, which most watch companies are lucky if they have one. And so now he's starting over again. He's going to have to come up with all new movements, which is going to be really interesting. Unfortunately, from the rumors I hear, it's also that they're going to be very expensive watches. And let's see, Domenico, I have seen 2 fantastic and futuristic watches. One is MBMF Frog 3 and HYD H3 models. Yeah, those are pretty wild. They have, some of them, for some reason, HYD hasn't done that well that I could see, but they're still around. And I guess they must have somebody who likes them. Oh, your surgeon wore a big Flieger. It was IWC. What? Oh, advertise. Let's see. Brand name in any product is the most important for their financial viability. There's some truth to that. Oftentimes, there's more truth to that than having a quality product. That is true, but unfortunate. Hi, Andrew. How you doing? What really makes a watch a Swiss? What? Of the movement, where the brand is headquarters, where the watch is. Oh, they've got all kinds of rules Andrew, before you can put Swiss made on a watch, you have to do all of this. You have to have a certain percent of everything made in Switzerland. I think one company got in trouble because they were using these Chinese gear in their wheel train, and I guess it didn't add up to enough, and so they couldn't put Swiss made. One of the funny things is FP Journe. FP Journe does everything in Switzerland. In fact, most of everything he does is in Geneva, and he could care less about putting Swiss made. Same thing, none of his watches have an official chronometer, but he names them like Chronomètre Surveillance. He just names them that, and he'll put chronometer on or anything else he wants to. And he just doesn't care what they think. And so instead of Swiss made, he puts Geneva made. And I think that's just, it's sort of a funny thing. Here's a guy who could easily, his watches could easily get the Geneva seal, but to me, he thought they would be lucky to get the FP Journe seal. So you have a lot of these different things, but when we come down to it, we've got to ask ourselves, what are we spending all this dough on? The reason I had brought this up originally was because we do that with everything else. I mean, if you spend a couple $1,000 out of your household money on something, usually there's a discussion about it, unless you're a bachelor living all by yourself. But I mean, any kind of thing like that, really, worry about and think about a lot. Whereas with a watch, plunk out, $3,000 to $5,000 without thinking twice about it. Anything above that, I'll think twice, and they go ahead and do it. So it's a funny kind of thing, but then we have to, at some point, we got to pull back and say, wait a minute, what are we doing here? That if a watch's part or labor, not sure, is more than 60% dead. Yeah, it's something like that, Amatrice. Clyde, what are you doing? Hey, Nephron, Geneva made, right. Yeah, now, Clyde, that's sort of funny, I think. All of the fun that we used to have with H. Moser, I think they've settled down because they got in so much trouble. My favorite watch that they ever had wasn't the Swiss cheese watch. It was the one. It was the Icon watch. I love that Icon watch. I told Malin when I interviewed him, I said, "Look, if you ever decide to make those again, let me know because I want to buy one." They had a lot of fun with it, and they got in so much trouble with the SIHH. The guys who run Richemont, is that they had to pull the Icon watch. But they did that, and they made these really great watches. And they still do, but I don't know. I think it was sort of looking at they did two things. One, they put themselves on the map. Boy, I tell you, after some of the stunts they pulled, everybody knew about H. Moser. Their ads are the funniest ones. They have a whole series of ads where they're interviewing this advertising company, and they're scrambling around trying to come up with ads, and they're all disasters. Really a lot of fun. I think people spend money without thinking more than we realize. Well, yeah, I know. That's true. I not as much. I mean, the amount I spend on watches is, something I at least me, maybe the rest of you guys are more frugal or have more sense, which wouldn't surprise me. But in these times, is any scope to thoroughly examine on what we pay for? By examine, I mean research. By the time we are done, especially new releases, and decide to pay, the watch is gone. Well, Vivek, yeah, I mean, this is something why I think it's important to keep up with a number of different kinds of elements. Find out about who's making the movement. If I find out for example, that Agenor is making a new movement for some company. I'd like to find out about that as soon as I can. When Hermes bought 25% of Vaucher, that was a real sign that something important was happening with them as far as excuse me, as far as really getting into horology as opposed to simply being a fashion brand. I don't know. I don't fall for the brand hype. I really don't. I wouldn't have a Langenheim or a Van Cleef. It was certainly worth getting. I'm trying to remember when I got my a few years ago when I got the FP Journe, like Patek Philippe. I mean, people say, "Oh my God, you spent that much, you could buy a Patek Philippe." Now, done in U.S., we don't have to pay custom duty. I don't know how. Oh, Ball. I don't know. No, Ball watch is the right one. That's an unusual one. RG&M, yeah, that's another one that's done in the U.S. Also, there's a guy out in California, another guy in Oregon who makes some good watches. There's a Harry Winston and FP Journe collaboration on a residence watch. FP Journe's movement with Harry Winston Aesthetics. Yeah, Joseph, that was the very first Opus series. What Harry Winston started, and they started with that, they started the Opus series, and every year they would have a watch, a Harry Winston watch made by a noted watchmaker. In fact, one of them was actually done by Jean-Marc Viderec. You know, it was really the first full movement that he did was on a Harry Winston. But those Harry Winston, they're really funny. And you're exactly right. They started with FP Journe's chronometer resonance on that. Who is that Ukrainian watchmaker at AHCI that makes watches purely from wood? Gee, I don't know. I know of a guy who had some wood, wood cases, but I didn't know anyone who would make a watch made out of wood. The gearing on that would have to be very special. Derek, I usually blow through my annual watch budget by May of each year. That happens to me too, Derek. I know what you mean. Hey, Alex, how you doing? What is your opinion of some of the ultra expensive movements made in Japan by Grand Seiko? Do you think they are comparable to Swiss or German movements? Yeah, the Japanese have some really, really great movements, and I'm not talking about the spring drive. They have some extremely creative stuff. They really do. And so, yeah, I have a very high opinion of them. No, it doesn't. Mark, that's not true. Spending $5,000, $30,000 on watches, that takes a lot of savings and a lot of soul searching. Look for Harry Winston watches made before their buyout by Richemont. No, they weren't bought by Richemont. They were bought by Swatch. But that's a good point, Clyde. Yeah, they had. See, the thing of it is that they never ever claim to have their own movements, but they would get quality movements in their watches, like Girard-Perregaux. The Harry Winston I have has a base movement by Girard-Perregaux, and then the retrograde by Agenor. So they have a lot of really cool stuff like that. And to me, you hear these people howling, fashion brand and so on and so forth. And that's true insofar as the design is concerned, the design of the watches. The last time I talked to some this one guy in Harry Winston's Fifth Avenue store about their watches, and he said from now on they're only going to have Blancpain movements, which are essentially Frederic-Perregaux movements. But whether that's going to happen or not, you never know, because it's hard to know. I am hesitant between Rolex Cellini and H. Moser hand wine. Now, Alex, I tell you, take a look at that last video on that. I've got nothing against Cellini, but I have a lot for H. Moser. And if I was going to get a hand-wound watch with those two, G and H. Moser at Compagnie, without even thinking about it, they're really, I mean, for that kind of watch. You know, one of the things is that you have it, and this is not saying anything bad about Rolex, but rather Rolex is so well connected up with more of a sports watch kind of thing that the Cellini, even by Rolex, sort of gets sidetracked. And when they got rid of the Cellini prints, that was something I think that sort of indicated, like, here was this beautiful watch. I still like that a lot. And if the right one comes along at the right price, I'll probably grab it. I'm not impressed with spring drive. Wyback, this keeps coming up again and again. Let me explain about spring drive. Yes, I am impressed with it. It's incredible technology. What the Japanese did was to make an electrical charge in sufficient regularity, I'll put it that way, to run a quartz watch. I mean, that's essentially what's running the watch, is a quartz movement. And nothing against quartz, but my major interest is in purely mechanical watches. All right. Yeah, it's brilliant, but I don't want a quartz watch. Clyde, that's very, very, very good point. Since I have one, Joe, let me answer that question about the early Harry Winstons. That is the fun thing about it is that there are so many prizes in those Cracker Jack boxes. You never know what's going to go in there, and so you're really very much on your own. If you call Harry Winston, they don't have a clue what's in their watches. No offense, and they're great people. If you ever have a chance to go into one of their boutiques on Fifth Avenue in New York, it's a wonderful experience. When I went and they changed my band for me, but it took them a long time to do it. And so they apologized, and they gave me this great travel case for my watch, just because it took them too long to change the band. But yeah, it's something that pre-swatch ownership is, if you can find, and there are a lot of them out there. I like the ones that have what I call the buck teeth. They have those three pillars, and they're really, after they're designed around the pillar on the Fifth Avenue Harry Winston, the original Fifth Avenue Harry Winston. What happened after Swatch bought it? Across the street from the original Harry Winston, they bought some property, and they have three stores right next to one another. They have Blancpain, Breguet, and Harry Winston, all three of them lined up there. And so if you go, if you go down Fifth Avenue and you find them, you can go into one after the other. I went into their Breguet shop, and man, I tell you, it's really a beautiful store, but the prices were just were mad. They wanted like $30,000-$40,000 for a tradition, a brigade tradition. And I really liked that, but I found it for like, $10,000 less than they were asking for pretty quickly, pretty easy to do. John, see ya. I'm sorry we weren't able to say goodbye. Daniel Ross, Nephrion, that is another deal. Those Daniel Ross are such a good buy. I've been noticing their prices have been creeping up, but so let's be quiet about it because they are such a good buy and they're such neat watches. A lot of the more reasonable priced Daniel Ross have a movement by somebody else, but they're really good movements. Like the one I got it's a chronograph, and they have an El Primero movement in it. They didn't put in some cheap movement, but they put in a really good one. And I think in some of the other watches that aren't with the Daniel Roth movement, you'll find some things like that. The older Cartier, some movements designed by Journe. Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's an interesting one, James. Let's see. Okay. Hey, Tom, I keep seeing adverts for Armand. Never heard of them before. Have you heard of them? Yeah. Armand Strom makes some really good watches. They have one of the, they have a resonance watch, Thomas, and they're very expensive though. And Armand Strom is one of those funny ones that seem to fall through the cracks sometimes. So, hey, Crappy. Let's see. Javi, how are you? Okay. The retail prices are most of the time meant to cover some of the store costs of making money more than should be. Well, Mohammed, yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a very interesting thing. If you have a bricks and mortar store in New York City on Fifth Avenue or Madison Avenue, I shudder to think what the monthly nut on that is going to be. But they feel it's important to have it. A guy that might be able to tell you more about that is Federico. Federico used to work, I think it was in the Fifth Avenue store of Piaget for a while. And he'd probably be able to tell you at the time he was working on it were really a time that the Chinese government cut back on buying watches. Curious about the Daniel Roth. Vivek, I tell you, one of the most interesting things about Daniel Roth is that, who was it now? Yeah, Breguet. He was the guy that they hired to sort of bring back Breguet to the Breguet quality with the Breguet style. Back in, trying to think, the 90s, I think, late 80s and 90s, sometime around that time, Breguet was simply a name and the watches were, just something. And so they wanted the Chayume brothers who owned Chayume, which is a big name in a jewelry in Paris. They bought it, and then they brought in this one guy who was like a super manager, and then they brought in Daniel Roth, and Daniel Roth did magic with the Breguet. And then after they had to go into bankruptcy and some other kinds of things, Daniel Roth said, "The heck with it. He'll just start his own company." He did that for a number of years. It's tough, though. It's a very tough business, especially without a lot of money behind you. Let's see. I like Vintage King Seiko. Okay. Yeah, the Seiko's got a lot of neat watches now. I know, and I'm not being insulting to say this. I've got a Seiko 5, and I love my Seiko 5. And the reason I like it, when this is the same one that, not the, I mean, it's a brand new one, but it's using basically the same everything that they had when it first came out in the 1960s. And at that time, they had all these innovations that were in this one watch. And so that's one of the reasons I got it. Plus, it was relatively inexpensive and a lot of fun to have. Hey, Alex, what's up? Let's see. Oh, frying pan time. Okay, pulled the trigger and got a JLC home time. Good one, Alex. Air fryer time. Yeah. Okay. Underachieving. I like to see the frying pan. If I hear much longer, you'll see it. Anyway, guys, thanks for coming, and great seeing all of you or hearing from you. Everybody stay safe. It's not over yet. Boy, oh, by the way, one other thing. This is important. Our project that we had, it's almost impossible to do during the pandemic. I wanted to go to Switzerland and check out the movement. I mean, you know, if a bunch of us are going to spend a lot of money on this thing, and talk to them and find out some other options. And I think that what we decided this morning was that if we waited until this whole thing is past us, maybe in October, when a bunch of us, everybody, of course, is invited, goes to the Watch Time show in New York. That's usually sort of an annual gathering place until this year. But then we could sort of revive it and talk more about it, and hope to see everyone there. Anyway, I wanted to mention that. So I'm going to put that on hold for now. I'll contact Aganor and say, look, guys, this is just crazy doing it this time. Take care, guys, and be safe.